From selling jerseys in a small German shop to becoming the mastermind behind Barcelona's winning season, Hansi Flick's story is the kind of football fairy tale you'd think was made up. But what if I told you the biggest influences in his career weren't trophies, tactics, or transfers, but a humble job, a heartbreaking illness, and years spent working in the shadows? This is how a jersey seller became the best coach in Europe. You know, when Hansi Flick was announced as Barcelona's new manager, most people didn't know what to expect. This wasn't a flashy ex-player or a big media personality. This was a guy who'd been out of the spotlight for a while. After a mixed spell with Germany, people weren't exactly calling him the next Pep Guardiola, but just one season later, he's silenced every doubter. Under Flick, Barcelona didn't just improve, they completely transformed. He took a team struggling with identity, confidence, and consistency and made them ruthless again. Tactically disciplined, pressing smart, moving the ball quickly. This wasn't the slow, predictable Barca we saw in recent seasons. This was a team with purpose, and the results, they speak for themselves. La Liga title? Secured. They didn't just win it, they controlled it from start to finish. Copa del Rey? Flick made smart rotations all through the tournament and still managed to dominate in every round. Supercopa? That final was a masterclass in reading the opponent and exploiting space. But what's even more impressive than the trophies is how he's made this team click. Young players like Lamine Yamal and Pedri flourished under him. Veterans like Lewandowski looked sharper and more involved. Every player had a clear role, and you could tell they understood exactly what was expected of them. This wasn't just a team playing good football. This was a system working perfectly. And yet, for all the praise he's getting now, not many people know that Hansi Flick's rise wasn't traditional. His career wasn't shaped in elite academies or through big clubs. It was built quietly, patiently, and through three major events that most people never talk about. His early days selling football jerseys, the personal battle he faced when his wife was diagnosed with cancer, and the years he spent learning behind the scenes as an assistant coach. Each of those chapters shaped the coach and the man he is today. When we look at most top-level managers, there's usually a pattern. Former players who jump into coaching, rise through youth systems or assistant roles, and eventually get the big job. But with Hansi Flick, the path wasn't clear-cut. He didn't follow the typical route. What shaped him had nothing to do with elite football environments or early access to power. It was real life. After retiring from football early due to injury, Flick didn't jump straight into coaching. Instead, he went back to his roots, his small hometown of Bammental, and started running a sportswear shop. For years, that's what he did, selling jerseys, boots, and training gear. He talked to kids, to parents, to fans. Every day was about helping people who loved the game, not because they were professionals, but because they cared about it the way most of us do, from the outside. It doesn't sound glamorous, but this period shaped everything about how Flick sees football. When you're behind a counter instead of on a touchline, you learn to listen. You hear people's stories, frustrations, and hopes. You start to understand how football makes people feel, and that emotional connection, Flick carried that into his coaching. It's why his players talk about how approachable and understanding he is. It's why he knows how to read a room, not just tactically but emotionally. That shop wasn't just a way to make a living. It was there that he learned how to manage people, how to connect, how to stay humble, and those lessons didn't leave when he went back into football. In fact, they became the foundation of his style, calm, clear, and grounded. When you watch him on the sidelines, he's not just shouting instructions. He's communicating with players like someone who actually understands what motivates them. So no, Hansi Flick didn't start his managerial journey with a clipboard on a training ground. He started it in a shop, surrounded by jerseys and conversations. And honestly, that might be the reason he understands the modern player better than most. But aside from knowing how to communicate, another real-life moment that will teach him how to manage people was a family battle. You know, most people talk about tactics, titles, and formations when they talk about great managers. But the thing that really shaped Hansi Flick into the kind of leader he is today wasn't a match or a training session. It was something far more personal and far more difficult. In 2010, while Flick was still the assistant manager for the German national team, his wife Silke was diagnosed with cancer, and this wasn't just a short-term scare. It was a serious, life-threatening illness. At the time, he was part of one of the most demanding football setups in the world, working under Joachim Löw, preparing for the biggest tournaments, surrounded by non-stop pressure and noise. But suddenly, none of that mattered. Football took a back seat. He had to be a husband first, not a coach, not a tactician. just a husband who was watching the person he loved go through something that was completely out of his control. And this experience changed him. Flick has never spoken about it for sympathy. He doesn't use it as a story to gain admiration. But those close to him say that this period in his life is when he really began to understand the value of emotional connection. Not just in his personal life, but in football too. This is where his man management started to evolve. He became more human in the way he approached the players he worked with. He began to understand that these weren't just athletes, they were people. People with families, personal struggles, and emotions that didn't just switch off when they stepped onto a pitch. That shift is still visible in how he works today. At Barcelona, he's known for reaching out to players personally, not just in training but outside of it. When Spain was preparing for the Euro 2024 final, he took the time to personally message and support several of the Spanish players. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because he understands what it feels like to need support when things are heavy behind the scenes. You see it in how he deals with younger players too. He doesn't just tell them what to do, he listens, he checks in. He gives them space to grow without making them feel like a mistake could ruin their future. That kind of understanding doesn't come from coaching courses or tactical seminars. It comes from real-life experience, from pain, from love, from care. During his wife's treatment, he had to learn patience. He had to learn empathy. He had to learn what it meant to show up for someone when there's nothing you can fix, only support. And those lessons? They're part of his coaching DNA. It's also why you never see him explode on the sidelines or throw players under the bus after a bad performance. He doesn't lead by fear. He leads by trust, by connection. He builds relationships that go beyond football. And when you look at how quickly players at Barcelona have bought into his ideas, how much they fight for him on the pitch, that's not just tactics. That's personal, that's emotional leadership. So yeah, his time as a jersey seller taught him how to connect with people. But it was this, his wife's battle with cancer, that taught him how to care for them. And that might be the most important thing a coach can ever learn. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, please hit the subscribe button. Before Hansi Flick became known for his tactical brilliance as an assistant coach with Germany, he was the head coach of a small, ambitious team, TSG Hoffenheim. And at the time he took over in 2000, Hoffenheim wasn't even close to being the Bundesliga club we know today. They were in the Oberliga Baden-Württemberg, which was the fourth tier of German football. But here's where Flick's story starts getting real. In his very first season, he won the league and got them promoted to the Regionalliga Süd. That alone was a big achievement. It wasn't flashy football. It was gritty, disciplined, and well-structured. And more importantly, it showed that Flick could take a team with limited resources and make them function like a well-oiled unit. Hoffenheim weren't dominating with individual brilliance. They were winning because of coaching. Flick's coaching. But the story at Hoffenheim didn't end with celebration. In fact, after 4 seasons of trying to push them even higher to the second Bundesliga, he fell short. Despite steady progress and strong league finishes, the club felt like it had reached a ceiling under him. In 2005, they let him go. That moment was tough. Flick had built something from the ground up, but results are what matter in football, and promotion was the ultimate goal. Getting sacked after all that work was a moment of reflection for him. He wasn't the coach who would jump into the next available job. He knew something was missing: tactical depth, high-level experience, exposure to the game at the very top. He had ambition, but ambition without knowledge doesn't take you far. Flick needed to reinvent himself, and that reinvention started with RB Salzburg. At Salzburg, he joined as an assistant to Giovanni Trapattoni, one of the most experienced managers in football. This was Flick's first time really stepping back to observe, to absorb ideas rather than implement them. Trapattoni was old school: defensive structure, patience, control of space, and most importantly, set pieces. It wasn't Flick's favorite style of football. He wasn't inspired by passive counter-attacking play, but even in a system he didn't love, he kept learning. He began forming his own ideas. He started to pick apart what worked, what didn't. He saw how important discipline off the ball was, but also how frustrating it could be when teams lacked the freedom to create. Those conflicting philosophies would come to define Flick's coaching identity: a disciplined structure with explosive attacking freedom. But the real turning point came in 2006. When he joined the German national team as assistant manager under Joachim Löw. This wasn't a tactical playground, it was a world-class classroom. He was on the inside of a system that was rebuilding after years of underperformance. And Löw, although the figurehead, relied heavily on Flick, especially when it came to structuring training sessions, analyzing opponents, and managing the dynamics of a squad that included some of the most gifted players in Europe. One moment that showed Flick's tactical understanding was during the Euros in 2008. Löw was suspended for a match against Portugal, and Flick stepped in as interim coach. Germany won that game, And if you go back and watch it, you can see the core of Flick's tactical preferences: intensity, structured pressing, quick transitions, and efficient build-up play. It was the prototype of the kind of football we'd see years later at Bayern and now at Barcelona. But instead of letting that moment boost his ego, Flick took it as a reminder of how much more he had to learn. He stayed loyal to Low, learning every detail about international tournament management, how to manage egos, how to unify a squad for short bursts, how to prepare tactically in just days. And it worked. Germany reached the Euro 2008 final, then the 2010 World Cup semi-final, and finally, they won the World Cup in 2014. Flick was right there through all of it, not just passing cones and taking warm-ups. He was in the tactical meetings, in the video analysis, and the man management decisions. He wasn't just an assistant, he was part of the brain behind the team. But more than tactics, his time in the national team taught him something else: how to deal with high-level players under extreme pressure. International football is different. You don't have players for 10 months. You get them for a few weeks, and you need them at their absolute best. Flick learned how to build trust quickly, how to simplify complex ideas, and how to get buy-in from players who were already stars at their clubs. This is where his communication style evolved. He learned how to be direct without being harsh, how to explain his ideas without overwhelming players, and how to build unity in a group full of egos. That skill has carried directly into what we've seen him do at clubs. Whether it was at Bayern or now at Barcelona, Flick's teams often start strong, not because they've trained for months, but because the players buy into him fast. That comes from his experience with Germany, where trust and clarity were more important than anything else. Looking back, his time as an assistant might not seem like the flashiest part of his journey. There were no trophies with his name, no interviews centered around him, and no big headlines. But this was where the foundation was built. This was where Hansi Flick became a real coach. Not just someone who understood football, but someone who could lead a group at the highest level. And that decision to stay in the shadows is what prepared him for everything that came next. And the next big character was his move to Bayern. By the time Hansi Flick arrived at Bayern Munich in late 2019 as an assistant coach under Niko Kovac, most people didn't expect him to become the head coach, let alone one of the most successful managers in Europe. He was respected, but still somewhat under the radar. However, when Kovac was dismissed midway through the season, Flick was handed the reins, initially as an interim solution. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Flick took a Bayern team that looked disorganized and struggling and quickly transformed them into a dominant force. His style was clear and sharp. High pressing, fluid positional rotations, and lightning-fast transitions that overwhelmed opponents. The players responded immediately. Thomas Müller found a new lease of life. Alphonso Davies developed into a world-class talent, and seasoned stars like Joshua Kimmich and Leon Goretzka elevated their games tactically. Flick's Bayern was relentless, both defensively and offensively. Under his leadership, Bayern Munich achieved a historic sextuple, winning 6 major trophies in just over a year. They took the Bundesliga, DFB Pokal, Champions League, UEFA Super Cup, German Super Cup, and FIFA World Cup. But beyond the trophies, Flick's Bayern was exciting to watch. Energetic, aggressive, and efficient. Behind the scenes, though, things were complicated. Flick had serious disagreements with Bayern sporting director Hasan Salihamidzic, especially about transfers and how much control he could have over the squad. Flick wanted a greater say in shaping the team, but those wishes weren't fully supported. Eventually, these tensions led Flick to leave Bayern in 2021, despite having reached the highest peak of his coaching career. After Bayern, Flick took on the role of managing the German national team, succeeding Joachim Löw. Expectations were sky high given his recent successes, but Flick's tenure with Germany proved much more challenging. The team failed to live up to its potential, struggling to find a clear identity and consistency. At Euro 2020, Germany showed signs of disarray, and the 2022 World Cup was a major disappointment as the team failed to advance beyond the group stage. The squad had the talent but lacked the cohesion and urgency that had marked Flick's Bayern side. Flick tried to experiment and adjust tactics, but nothing seemed to fully click. Results were poor, and the team's style was uninspiring. By 2023, after a series of lackluster performances, Flick was dismissed, becoming the first German national team coach ever to be fired mid-cycle. It was a tough blow for a man who had been riding such a high just a couple of years earlier. But what sets Flick apart is his refusal to give up. Instead of stepping back or retreating from football, he kept learning and adapting. He stayed connected with the game, studied new ideas, and maintained strong relationships with players and other coaches. For Flick, setbacks aren't endings, they're chances to grow and improve. So when Barcelona came calling, it surprised many, especially after the rough patch with Germany. But Flick saw this opportunity differently. He viewed it as a chance to take everything he'd learned throughout his career, from his early days at Hoffenheim to Salzburg, Bayern, and the national team, and built something new and meaningful. For him, failure was never a stopping point. It was another layer of experience that made him a better coach. This mindset, the determination to keep pushing forward despite setbacks, has shaped Hansi Flick into one of the most interesting and resilient coaches in European football today. Look at everything Hansi Flick has achieved, from selling jerseys to lifting the Champions League trophy. It might seem like a fairy tale, but when you know the full story, it's not surprising at all. Flick is a man defined by resilience. Someone who's faced setbacks, heartbreak, and doubts, yet never stopped pushing forward. Whether it was learning from early failures, coping with personal struggles, or navigating tough professional challenges, he kept growing, adapting, and improving. But what do you think? Did his early struggles define him as the coach he is today? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to check out our last video on why it sucks to be Bellingham right now. Thank you.